This video is brought to you in part by TCGplayer.com. If you're interested in viewing this deck list, just click the first link in the description. What's up, my wizards? It's Dev, Mtg, we like magic. And today, after a couple of weeks of admittedly weird decks, some of those are weird, I hear you guys, we're going to finally do a deck that is not only rotation proof, but I actually think is really strong. Today, Red-White Deserts. And I know what you're probably thinking, and I couldn't blame you. Red-White Deserts is strong? Actually, yeah, I'm just as surprised as you probably are right now, but after playing with the deck for a couple of weeks, I can say easily this is definitely one of the most competitive decks that we've done on the channel in a while. So, hope you guys enjoy it. Let's check out Red-White Deserts. Well, I want to start things off by looking at the things that make the deserts in the mana base matter. And we're going to look at the deserts cards first, because that makes sense. You might also be thinking, why red-white, by the way, if you're going to make a deserts deck? Well, I'm actually more attracted to the deserts matter cards in those colors than any other colors by far, starting with Deserts Hold, which we're going to play a whole playset of. Well, it turns out that if you tack on 3 life to Arrest, it's actually pretty playable, especially right now, and I don't see it getting that much worse after rotation. Now, two of the best things about this card is that against fast aggro, it'll catch you back up in your life total a little bit and shut down one of their dudes. Preferably Hazoret, because this card is specifically very good against gods. You know, Hazoret can attack, she can't block, she can't use her dumb Reachy onboard ability. That's great, you know, and even after the format rotates and mono red might not be as much of a thing anymore, format's still going to be creature dominated as far as I can tell. I mean, the set coming up is a set about pirates and dinosaurs, right? So probably still going to see a lot of creature-based strategies in the upcoming standard, so I don't see Deserts Hold getting much worse anytime soon, especially if the format gets a little bit more mid-rangey after rotation. We might see more, you know, Ronuses popping up. So anytime we see gods in the format, this card is going to be playable. Now, the other card in these colors that attracted me to a Deserts theme was actually Sand Strangler, and that's only because I played this card out of sideboards in a couple of decks, and I played it in the Blue-Red Eternity deck that a lot of people thought was really weird. And it was. It was a fine deck. Anyway, I played Sand Strangler in a few things now, and I've always been impressed by it, so I wanted to try it in a Deserts Matter, you know, a real Deserts Matter deck. And it's still fine. This is another card that I don't see getting too much worse after rotation. Flametongue Kavoing the creature, almost, you know. Sometimes when cards are strictly better, we say this is like that card on steroids, but this is like Flametongue Kavu off of steroids. But it turns out that's still fine. A 3/3 body is a threat, it's a respectable threat too. And it's going to take out usually at least one thing on the other side of the board. If not, a really important creature on the other side of the board sometimes. So Sand Strangler is totally fine. I've liked this card a lot more than I thought I would when I first read it during spoiler season. Turns out it's great. Just removal on a body is always going to be good. We tend to forget that occasionally, but Sand Strangler is actually like 4 stars. Would recommend. Now, in building the deck from here, I had a couple of decisions. There was definitely a fork in the road. I could either try and go really, really aggro and make Deserts Hold and Sand Strangler be sort of the top of our curve, or I could make a mid-range, almost control deck and just prioritize removal. Tried a little bit of both, and definitely had way, way more success by a lot with the control-y route. So with that in mind, we're going to play a ton more removal than just what I've already shown you, and we're going to play some big splashy threats to finish the game off. So let me take you through all of the removal first, starting with the 3 copies of Magma Spray. Now, we want Magma Spray for a couple of reasons. First of all, we're going to encounter aggro decks, and we want to have answers as low on the curve as possible for those creatures. And we also don't want creatures coming back from the graveyard after we've done killed them. You know, we've got a couple of good options for that in this deck already, like Deserts Hold. It doesn't actually kill things like Earthshaker Kenra, or Scrapheap Scrounger, or Dread Wanderer, or whatever. It just makes them sit there and look dumb. So we already have some options, but I wanted one that was really, really low on the curve to kill all those aggro creatures and just never have to worry about them again. Exile will still be important after rotation. We're also going to play 4 copies of Abrade, easiest card in the entire deck to justify. This is possibly one of the top 3 red cards, if not the best red card in the entire format right now. Just so many decks run Abrade, and that's because it is one of the more versatile cards that we've seen in Standard in a while. Not only 3 damage at instant speed to a dude, Zap a Guy is always good at instant speed for a cheap cost. We'll always take that, but adding on to that, killing Torrential Gearhulks at instant speed and killing Godpharaoh's Gifts and stuff, there's a ton of artifacts we can kill with this thing. So I am a huge fan of Abrade right now. Definitely want to play all 4 copies, obviously. I'm also going to play 3 copies of Sweltering Suns, and man, we are dedicated to our removal plan. Yes, matter of fact, we are. Again, we're sort of a control deck is our philosophy here. We're going to play a bunch of removal, and we need our sweeper, and we prefer it to be really low to the ground against, in this format, zombies decks, Ramanap Red. I hate to say it again, but Ramanap Red's being pushed out of the format in a way by things like Black Zombies, which card is still good against, and Green-Black Aggro, which Sweltering Suns is still good against. So we just got a huge spread of decks that Sweltering Suns doesn't outright destroy, but you'll at least get like a 3-for-1 a lot of the time out of a Sweltering Suns. And if you can't use it, then you can cycle it. Like game 1 against Control, just cycle it away, it's totally fine. So Sweltering Suns has a lot of versatility, like a lot of the things we've looked at already. We're definitely going to play a few copies. This is our only main deck sweeper. We've got some more action on the sideboard, don't worry. But in this format specifically, that's less mid-range and more aggro, I think Suns is the best sweeper we can play. Here's another piece of removal, but we're almost done with them, I promise. We're going to play 2 copies of Cast Out in the main deck. This is just a good catch-all, and I've said that before, but in this deck it's important. You know, we've got a lot of stuff that murders creatures, but we don't really have a whole lot of stuff that murders anything else. You know, we've got a Braid against artifacts. We've got some options out of the sideboard, including more Cast-Outs, but against, like, enchantments and planeswalkers, especially planeswalkers, we may be in a little bit of trouble, and that's where Cast Out comes in. Just a great, again, versatile piece that we can play right now that just allows us to have a panic button against like anything that we wouldn't normally be able to kill. But let's start looking at some threats now, because we eventually have to actually win this game of Magic that we're playing. So with that in mind, let's start by looking at the 4 copies of Glorybound Initiate. Now, I want to play a 2-drop creature in the deck, and I think of all of our options, Glorybound is probably the best. And to justify that, I'll say that it's good against multiple decks. You know, against Control, this can be a big fat threat. We want those, especially at a relatively low mana cost, so we can sneak them up under counterspells and stuff. But against aggro and even mid-range decks, this is 4 lifelinks swinging in, which can make up a lot of life that you've lost so far, help you win races, be really tough for them to get around in combat. So I like it against not only Control, but also aggro. And yeah, we're already pretty good against aggro with all this removal, but why not have another option against those decks so we can just really shut them out? We are very good against aggro, you guys. I just want to let you know. But against Control, we suffer a bit, so we need some threats. We'd like if they were lower down the dial, and we want them to be relatively big. I think that Glorybound fits all of those markers. We're going to keep riding the glory train, though, with our 4 copies of Glorybringer in the deck. This is still a great finisher, man. Just a haste flyer, comes down, immediately swings, can kill something. Like, sometimes this kills one of their guys and kills their planeswalker all in one shot, and they never saw it coming. Like, Glorybringer is still a great card, you know? Its price has gone from, like, over $8 at one time down to like $4, and I think this is a decent time to pick it up. Glorybringer, regardless of whether a lot of people are playing it at the like higher levels of competitive standard, is always going to be a good card at your F&M. Just so many good things about Glorybringer, man, and you get to play like huge flying dragons and go raw. So there's also that. Now, we're playing 6 Planeswalkers in the deck, and these are tantamount to the deck's importance, and this is also where the deck gets expensive. You might have been thinking, like, huh, this doesn't look too expensive so far. Like, this is competitive, really? No, this is where things are going to take a turn for the wallet, so I'm sorry about that, but I wanted to build a deck that was as competitive as possible, and originally this deck, like, began life as a budget deck, but it just wasn't finishing games, and we needed some heavy hitters to get brought in, so with that in mind, we'll start with the 3 copies of Gideon of the Trials? Yeah, seriously. Well, first and foremost, this is a 3-mana 4/4 indestructible, which is never a bad deal. Like, if they printed a creature that was just 3-mana 4/4 indestructible, then people would be like, oh, it's a really good creature. Like, well, we sort of have that right here. So this is a threat that can swing in and win you the game. That's cool. And there's not a whole lot of control opponents going to be able to do it, especially especially after things like Grasp of Darkness rotate. Like, it's going to be tough to take this thing out once resolved. So, and it can get up under counterspells on the play sometimes, so that's important. Against aggro, we've got a bunch of removal. I don't know if you noticed, but there's almost like 30 removal pieces in this deck if you count like creatures that can remove creatures. So we're playing half our deck is literally removal here. So it's not too hard to keep the board clean in case you need to for his emblem. And of course, here's the real problem. We're going to play 3 copies of Chandra, Torch of Defiance, just coming in like a wrecking ball against the budget there. Sorry about that. It's nearly $100 for this 3 of, but she's just the best card in the deck, no questions asked, hands down, no matter what. First of all, she is incredibly importantly card advantage. We really don't have a whole lot of that in this deck. So just the ability to get through our deck a little bit faster, a card at a time every turn, is actually a lot more important than you might think. We're a control deck with no card advantages, no kind of control deck at all. So honestly, just the ability to draw us cards is incredibly important on this Planeswalker. But she also is removal. That's always good. And if we get her ultimate off, we can very easily win the game within just a couple of turns a lot of the time. And she can ramp us. Like, we don't draw a 5th land, she can get us to Glorybringer. That's occasionally relevant. So just like everything she does is good, and she does 4 things. One card that does 4 things, and a few of those things astonishingly relevant. So definitely play some Chandras if you can get your hands on her. I totally understand if you can't. You know, just play another. I considered Combustible Gearhulk. You could consider that, or like another. Like, you could play Cataclysmic. I thought about that, but I never actually tried it. So again, these are untested suggestions here. But I think if you can't afford her, there's plenty of other big threats you can play. Angel of Invention is something else that I thought about. You know, when resolved against control, Angel of Invention is just a huge board, and it's good against aggro too. It's another one of those cards. So if you can't afford Chandra, there are options, but honestly, Chandra's just ridiculous. She's a boss. She's one of the best cards in the format, and especially after rotation, she might be the best card. So if you can get Chandras, you play them. But to finish off the main deck, let's cleanse our palette with something like really, really cheap. We're going to play one copy, just one. Silver Bullet, fun of Jeru with Eyes Open. Now, we don't want to play play sets of our Planeswalkers in this deck, I would say. You know, not only would that be a huge strain on the budget, that would suck, but also because, like, we don't want to draw into multiples of Planeswalkers we already have out. So I think 3 of Walkers is better than 4 of Walkers for a multitude of reasons, but I do think a tutor is still pretty good just in case we do need to tutor up a Gideon to protect an existing Gideon emblem or something like that. Or maybe we just really need a Chandra, because there's a lot of times when you really need Chandra. So Jeru, you know, tutors him up in case of emergency. And also, it's a threat. You know, 4-power body could be a lot worse. And yeah, it can get like Harness Lightning, it can get abraded, whatever. But at that point, it's probably already done its job and tutored up a Planeswalker for you. So you can still be okay with that. Now, there are 25 lands in this mana base, 14 of them deserts, which makes nearly 1 in 4 cards that you'll draw a desert. It's fairly easy to get a desert in this deck. And I don't have to tell you how good they are. Ramunap Ruins already has quite the reputation in this format, and Shefet Dunes is better than people are probably giving it credit for. This is another card I've played with a couple of times, and it's been fairly impressive, actually. Even if we only have a creature or 2 on board, a Shefet Dunes can sometimes make a big difference. Here's our sideboard right here, and I have been back and forth on this sideboard, but ultimately decided to come back to my original idea of having some aggro options. I told you earlier that we reached a crossroads after, you know, we determined that we definitely want to play these 2 Deserts Matters cards. We could have become either an aggro deck or a control deck, went down the road of control, but the sideboard reflects that aggro path a little bit here. Against the control decks that we're not great against, they make a lot of our removal dead game 1, you know. We got to have some sideboard plans. So we've got Kari Zev and Earthshaker Kinra to provide some small, low-to-the-ground, get-up-under counter spells kind of creatures. And in the case of Kari Zev, she goes a little wide. That's pretty cool. And in the case of Earthshaker, it can come back even bigger than it started. Resilient creatures are important against control. So I want some options in that matchup specifically. But here are your power rankings right here. A final score of 67, which is fairly high. That's the highest score in a minute on the channel, you know, and I think that that's a fairly objective score. It mostly gets there from high defense and versatility stats. Deck is incredibly versatile. A lot of cards do more than one thing against more than one deck, which is really important to point out. And as far as defense goes, again, we prioritize defense almost completely here. Most of our cards, even our offensive cards, do something defensive. And I know it looks like a lot of removal, but in the format we're in currently, at least, you will find that you'll almost never ever have cards dead in your hand against things like green-black or Ramunap Red, or even things like Teamer. You know, obviously mono-black zombies, things like that. You are not going to have dead cards in your hand very often because removal is incredibly useful in this format. And you will eventually draw into a Chandra that you can ultimate. You'll draw into a Gideon you can swing in for indestructible. You'll draw into a Glorybringer you can immediately start hitting them with. There's a lot of ways to finish in this deck, a lot more than it might originally look like. Even a Sand Strangler can deal 9 damage to them over the course of a few turns, provided that you can keep the board clear on their side, which is not hard to do in this deck. But the budget is a little bit higher than anything we've done in a while, too. The budget is just north of $200 on TCG Player right now. It's actually not too bad for a really competitive deck. In my experience, this deck has won a lot of games, more so than the decks I've been trying lately. I loved Blue-Red Eternity, I loved Mono Blue Aggro, I loved Majestic Mirror Arc, but those are decks where it can really feel like a slog to win games against really good decks in this format, you know. But this deck, not so much. Against things like Green-Black and Mono-Black Zombies, you're going to have a really good matchup, and that's not even to say anything about Ramanap Red. You have a very good matchup against that deck. So try this thing out, especially if your format, your local meta is just dominated by creature-based decks. This might be the thing for you, man. This deck is actually really much, much better than I originally anticipated it was going to be, and I have a lot of faith in it. So try it out. Let me know how you feel. But what are we doing next time? Well, next up is finally Blue-Black Cycling. I feel like that deck has had enough support that I can just go ahead and do the deck tech. But don't worry, I've got a couple of other decks I want to bring to you before the format's up here. But just in case, go ahead and get any requests in that you might have, especially something rotation-proof. If you want to see anything rotation-proof, let me know about it, and I'll get right on building something if it sparks my interest. So let me know what your suggestions might be, and I might start working on your deck. In the meantime, you can like the video if you enjoyed the video. You can follow us on Twitter at SBMTGDev or support us on Patreon at patreon.com/SBMTG. For whatever reason, I got like a third of the AdSense that I usually get, and I'm not really 100% sure why. So if you guys want to help out on Patreon, that'd be awesome. Just even $1 helps me an awful lot. So do that if you want to, and you can also click that first link in the description to check out this deck list on TCG Player. Even just clicking the link helps the channel out. So help me. If you would, please. I put in some work for you guys. Help me out. And I'll see you guys very, very soon. I'm Deb from SBMTG. Thanks for watching, my wizards.